I'm going to show you how to draw glue. Glue can be pretty thick, so we're going to start by gathering it around the opening. Also, don't worry about making perfectly smooth circles. It can be lumpy, so just have fun with the shape. It also has a bit of weight to it, so gravity is going to pull it down around the object. There's really no consistent shape to it, so just have fun with the way you want it to flow. And remember to alternate between areas where it collects and areas where it's thinner. Once you have your basic shape, you want to go in and lightly erase for a more transparent look. Again, there's no consistency, so just erase purely based on vibes. Once you've gone through with your eraser, just pick a direction for your light source and go in and add some highlights. You want to imply shape with your highlights as well, so I tend to go around the area where I did some erasing. And if you want, you can make a layer under your glue and draw shadows to give it a bit more depth. Okay, happy drawing. Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to make things look wet. You're going to take the color of your object and make it into a darker hue. And on its own layer, you're going to draw a curve around this object where you want it to look wet. Fill in the color, and then we're going to lower the opacity so that's a little transparent. Use the soft brush of your eraser and lightly erase the center area of that shadow that you made so that it's a little transparent. From here, we're going to make a new layer and start drawing some highlights. You want to go around the perimeter of your shadow as well as along the edge. Include a few more highlights around your object, including some more highlights around the shadow area to indicate dripping. Then from here, you can either lower your opacity a bit or change your layer property to soft light. You want to make sure that the shadows always complement the shape of the object. And if you want, you can draw an additional shadow where the liquid meets the object just to give it a little extra depth. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to edge. Whether you're a traditional artist or a digital artist, at some point in time, you're going to learn how to edge. And depending on how long you've been drawing, chances are you've already been edging without realizing it. There are 3 different types of edging: the transitional, the form, and the shadow. Form edging is probably one of the easiest to understand. When you're just dealing with line art, it's simply the lines that you create to form the edges of your object. Transitional edging is used to show how light hits each plane of your form. It'll create a sort of gradient from dark to light. The darkest area will be where the light hits the least, and gets lighter where the light hits your object directly. And then we have shadow edging, which is a little similar to transitional edging. It's simply where your light hits the object the least and creates a shadow edge. And if your object is sitting on a reflective surface, the light will bounce off the surface and hit your object on the opposite side, and it will create this sort of shadow band. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to make more things look wet. Just pick your object that you want to make look wet, and for this example, I'm going to use a nut. And then we're going to take a slight beige color and draw around the area that we want to make look wet. Make sure to keep the shape of your object in mind when drawing your wet area, and consider how the liquid is going to flow around it. And once you have your wet area decided, you want to fill it with color. Then we're going to take the same color and draw some dripping under our nut. This area doesn't have to be perfect, so just have fun with the way it drips off the object. Once you've figured out your level of wetness, you want to lower the opacity just a little. I'm going to do mine to 75%. Now we're going to take a soft eraser and lightly erase some of this for more transparency. Make sure you keep the erasing predominantly around the center and keep the edges that nice creamy color. And don't forget to do the same sort of erasing around your drippage area. Now that you've completed your wet area, you want to take a lighter color and draw highlights in the direction of your light source. And if you want, you can include a shadow under your wet layer to help imply thickness. Once you've perfected your first wet nut, you can practice using other nuts of other shapes and sizes. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw the creamy center of a chocolate bun. Choose one end of your chocolate bun and start roughing in a tunnel that's going to cut through the center. And at the end of your tunnel, you want to sketch in a circular shape. The tunnel is where the cream is going to travel through, and it's going to eventually collect into this circle shape. Then you want to go in and draw some ridges that are going to be the interior wall of our bun. And all that interior dough is not going to be perfectly shaped, so just have fun with the way you draw it. Next, you want to pick a nice creamy color and fill in the center of our bun. In the center of this area, I drew in some darker squiggles that's going to help imply movement of our cream once we add the shading. Now, using the same darker color and a soft brush, I'm going to draw some motion lines that's going to imply the movement of our cream. And once you get to the circular area, you're going to curve your lines around this shadow area that you created. It'll take a bit of blending, but eventually you'll end up with motion lines that look like this. And finally, you want to take a lighter color and draw some highlights that will also help imply the movement of your cream. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw a pair of water balloons. One of the most important things to remember when drawing water balloons is that they have weight to them, so no matter what angle they sit at, they're going to be affected by gravity. So you're going to want to start with a circular shape where the weight will be at its heaviest, and elongate it with a more teardrop shape. Once you've roughed it in the shape of your water balloons, you can finalize it with line work, and then fill it in with a color of your choosing. Pick a darker color for where you want your shadow to hit, and then a lighter color for your highlight. Once you've figured out basic water balloon shape, you can then start playing around with other water balloon shapes. Keep in mind that water balloons are easy to manipulate and will change shape depending on pressure, if they're hitting a flat surface, or sitting at an angle. Water balloons come in a bunch of different sizes and shapes, so let me know in the comments if you want to see any more examples. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw a pair of small water balloons. I've already done a video on how to draw regular sized water balloons, and we're going to be using some of the basic rules that I mentioned there. First, you want to start by roughing in a circle, and then elongate one of the ends so that's more of a teardrop shape. You don't want to elongate it too much. Since our water balloons aren't quite as full, gravity isn't going to affect it quite as much. Once you have your balloons sketched out, you can do your line work, fill in your colors, and add your shadow and highlight to help give it depth. Once you've figured out how to shape your water balloons, you can start playing around with other balloon shapes and angles. One of the most important things to remember when drawing smaller water balloons is that since they're not quite as full, gravity is going to affect them as much. So even if you're drawing them at different angles, they may largely stay the same shape. And depending on just how small your water balloons are, no matter the position you draw them in, they may not move much at all. There's a saying that goes that more than a handful is a waste. And while I agree with that, I also believe that all water balloons are created equal and worthy of love and attention. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw a pair of water balloons. Specifically, the really big kind. Compared to drawing small and regular sized water balloons, a lot of the same rules apply, but there will be a few differences. First, we're going to start with a couple of twin circles that'll be the base of our water balloons. And then you want to draw a couple of ovals to elongate the shapes. Once you have your rough shape, we're going to do our line art, and this is where the biggest differences will be. Because our water balloons are pretty heavy, gravity's going to weigh it down quite a bit. That's going to cause this section here to bend and stretch a bit before it rounds back out at the base. Once your line art is done, add a shadow at the base and a highlight in the direction of your light source. Once you've figured out the basic rules of drawing water balloons, you can use it to experiment with different angles and shapes. These water balloons here are more like a teardrop shape, whereas these are shaped more like pears. They could take on a different shape altogether if they're laying flat. And it's important to remember that the material is soft, and because they're filled with water, they're easy to manipulate. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw raindrops running down balloons. First, you want to pick a light creamy color and draw in the shape of your raindrop. Keep in mind the shape of your balloon because you want to draw the raindrop in a way that complements the curve of the balloon. Then you want to make another layer under your raindrop layer and then set that layer to multiply. Then we're going to pick a color that's slightly darker than my balloon color and use it to draw a shadow where the raindrop meets the balloon. Doing this will help imply some thickness of your raindrop. Then I'm going to take my soft eraser, lower the brush density, and then lightly erase the center of my raindrop to give it a bit of transparency. Once you have something like this, you then want to erase the top of the raindrop and make sure you do the same with the shadow. This will help show that the raindrop gets thinner as it runs down. And finally, you want to take a lighter cream color and start drawing some highlights. Once you experiment with one raindrop, you can then start experimenting with other raindrop shapes. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw glazed buns. First, you want to start out by roughing out the shape of your favorite buns, and then figure out just how toasty you want your buns to be. To add a little more interest, I'm going to color the top of my buns just a little darker than the base color. And then add some shadow around the bottom of your buns to give them a little more depth. Now pick a light color of your choosing and figure out how you want your glaze to run off the buns. The glaze doesn't have to be perfect, so just have some fun with how you want it to run off your bun. Once you have the shape of your glaze, you then want to lower the opacity of your glaze layer just a little. I did mine to about 75%. Next, we're going to take a soft eraser and begin to lightly erase the center of your glaze to give it a more transparent look. And of course, the trick to a good glaze is on the highlights. So go in with a lighter color and add highlights in the direction of your light source. Remember that not all buns are created equal. They come in many different shapes and sizes. The important thing is to have fun and draw them in a way that makes them look inviting and appetizing. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. It's been a while since I've given y'all a new tutorial, so I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to draw a bead of water. When drawing our liquid, you can use any color you want depending on the feel you're going for, but for this example, I'm just going to use plain white. So first you want to draw your bead of water, and I drew mine in a way that makes it look like it's running down a surface. And then you want to lower the opacity of that layer. I set mine to 10%, and it'll look something like this. Make a new layer on top of the previous one. Then, using a soft brush, use that same shade of white to draw along the perimeter of your water. It doesn't have to look perfect, and some parts of the white can be more transparent than the other. Next, when you use your eyedrop tool and capture the color of your background. And then in your color settings, you want to pick a color that's slightly darker than the original. I'm going to use my light pencil. And then on another layer, I'm going to draw a shadow close to the edge of our liquid. Drawing a shadow here where the white sort of feathers out helps to give it shape and depth. I draw that shadow in the thicker places where the water gathers. I then set that shadow layer to multiply, and I'm going to lower the opacity to 50%. It'll look like this. And finally, we're going to take a plain white. I'm going to use a hard pen tool and use it to draw some highlights in the direction of the light source. And that's how you draw a bead of water. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw a hand, reaching for a gold coin. Drawing hands is already pretty hard, even more so when the owner of said hand is reaching for something that they can't see. And they don't know exactly where the gold coin is located, they're going to feel around a little. We're going to start by roughing out the palm, the wrist, and the forearm. You want to draw the palm bending down at the wrist. This will give the hand a better angle for reaching for the gold coin. Once you have the shape of your palm, we're going to work on finger placement. We're going to have the index and middle fingers reaching out towards the gold coin, while the ring and pinky fingers are going to be hiding behind the thumb. The middle and index fingers are going to form a scooping motion so they can really get to where the gold coin is hiding. Once you've figured out the basic shape of your hand, you can go in with your line art and your colors. And while this detail isn't particularly necessary, I recommend drawing your fingernails to be relatively short. It'll make grabbing the gold coin a little more comfortable. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw a hand playing with a really soft pillow. First, we're going to start off by roughing out the shape of our palm. I always draw my palm in this pentagon-like shape, the highest part of it being where my middle finger will be. Next is finger placement. I typically draw my joints following the same line. However, the joints for the pinky and the thumb are lower than the others. Then I roughen the shape of the fingers. Keep in mind that each finger has an additional joint at the very tip, typically just below where the fingernail will be. However, the thumb does not have this extra joint. Now that our sketch is done, we can go ahead and do our line work. Now that we have our hand done, we can rough out how we want the hand to be gripping the pillow. You want to make sure to include areas where the fingers will be sinking into the material of the pillow. You want to also include areas where the pillow is bulging a bit to show how it's being gripped. Go ahead and do the line work of your pillow and erase the parts of the fingers that are sinking into the pillow. And that's how you draw a hand squeezing a pillow. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw a shirt draped around a pair of water balloons. As tempting as it may be to draw the fabric of the shirt around the water balloons in order to show off how well drawn they are, this isn't really how the material will fit around the water balloons. Rather than the shirt material outlining the water balloons like this, it'll fit a little more like this. In this instant, we have a loose-fitting shirt, and depending on the size of the water balloons, it's going to cause the material of the shirt to flare out. You also want to include some wrinkle lines under the base of the water balloon, and this will help indicate the way the material of the shirt drapes around the water balloons. The same rules will apply even if you're drawing a tight-fitting shirt. The material of the shirt will gather a bit tighter around the waist, and the wrinkle lines of the shirt will come inward in order to indicate how the material of the shirt is stretching around the water balloons. And you may even have some wrinkle lines in the center that indicate the stretch between each water balloon. The same rules apply even if you're drawing on a larger form. The wrinkle lines of your shirt will indicate shape without actually outlining it. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw a wet cucumber. First, you want to start with an oval shape for the general outline of your cucumber, and then add some circles and curved lines along your cucumber that will represent the ridges and bumps. Once you have the shape of your cucumber, you can go in and start inking. Just to switch things up a little, I'm using a textured brush to make our cucumber a little more interesting. Now that you have your line work done, select your cucumber and fill it in with a green of your choosing. I'm going to take a yellow and draw a little yellow patch because not all cucumbers are perfect. Now to make our cucumber look wet, I'm using a pale green to draw some curvy lines to show how the moisture will run off the cucumber. Once you know how you want the moisture to hit your cucumber, you can fill the color in. To help with the wet look, I'm going to use an eraser to lightly erase the center area. You want to make sure you're leaving most of the color around the perimeter. Next, you'll go in and draw some highlights in the direction of your light source. And if you want, you can take a darker green and draw a little shadow under the wet area to give it a little more depth. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw the inside of a strawberry. First, we're going to start off by roughing out the shape of our strawberry, which kind of has a heart shape like this. You can rough out some leaves if you want. And then you want to rough out the interior shape of the strawberry. The interior of the strawberry is shaped like this. These wavy lips here represent where the light color of the strawberry is. And the interior core sort of mimics the shape of the strawberry itself. Once your sketch is done, you do your line work. I'm using this color of red for the base color of my strawberry. And I'm going to take this lighter shade of pink and use a soft brush to lighten up the interior of the strawberry. For a little extra detail, I'm going to take this light shade of orange and use it to add a little orange to the interior of our strawberry. Now I'm going to use this very light shade of orange and use it to color in the core area of our strawberry. We're going to use the same very pale color in the center of the strawberry and use it to draw a little dip in the center of our core. Use that same color to draw some lines like this that complement the shape of the strawberry, and draw some yellow seeds that'll peek around the edge of the strawberry. And that's how you draw the inside of a strawberry. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw a pair of lemons. First, you want to start with a couple of twin circles, and then elongate both of the circles so that they're more of an oval shape. And draw the tip of your lemon where it sticks out a little more. Also, don't forget to draw the stem. Once you've roughed out the shape of your lemon, go ahead and do your line work. Fill in the base yellow and green for your lemon. This is the color that I picked for my yellow. And this is what I picked for my green. And if you want, you could draw the tip of the lemon a little lighter than the rest of it. This is the lighter shade of yellow that I used. And I applied it with a soft brush. Another optional detail is to draw a few texture specks at the top of your lemons. Draw your shadows in a way to help imply the shape of your lemons. And finally, draw some highlights in the direction of your light source. And that's how you draw a pair of lemons. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. Everyone loves a good Veiny candy bar. And I'm going to show you how to draw it. First, you want to sketch out the general shape, which is just a big rectangle. And the fun part is figuring out where to place the veins. Start with a thick vein that runs up the center, and then from the center, branch off, varying from thicker and thinner veins. And once you've figured out the general shape of your candy bar, we're going to go in and start our line art. Keep in mind that candy bars aren't completely symmetrical, so your lines don't have to be perfect. When it comes to doing the line art on the veins, pick one side that you want to stand out the most. And also remember to taper your line where the vein will end. Once you have the thick lines for your veins done, you want to go in and draw some thinner lines where the vein connects to the candy bar. Having a variation of thicker and thinner lines like this helps to give your veins more depth. Once your line art is done, we're going to pick a nice chocolate color for our candy bar. And I'm going to give it a slight gradient just to make our bar look more interesting. Next, we're going to add some shading under our veins to help them pop. And finally, add some lighting in the direction of your light source. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw a pea in a pod. First, you want to start off with drawing a diamond shape like this. Make sure the lines for the top half of the diamond are shorter than the ones that make up the bottom half. Next, you want to round off each point of the diamond, making it a little more of an oval shape. Next, we're going to draw a circle for our pea, which is going to sit up towards the top of the pea pod. The pea sits slightly under a hood, so we're going to draw the lines for the hood coming down the sides of the pod. And then there's a secondary oval shape that starts at the base of the pea and works its way all the way around to form a thin lip around the pod. Once you have your sketch finalized, do the line work around your pea pod and make sure to give the pea a little smiley face. We want him to look happy. Then you want to fill your shape with a nice green color. Choose a darker green to draw your shadows, and choose an even darker green to help imply depth. And finally, we're going to pick a yellowish green color to draw our highlights. And that's how you draw a pea in a pod. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. I'm going to show you a quick way to color leather. When people tend to render leather, they really bump up the highlights, which, while it looks good, looks more like latex than real leather. Fake leather does have these really exaggerated highlights, but the highlights on real leather are much more subdued. So to make this look like real leather, I'm going to start out with a dark gray color. Then I'll pick a slightly lighter gray and use my soft airbrush to start making highlights. We're going to start off with making some light highlights in the direction of the light source. And we're going to do that all around the leather. Next, we'll pick an even lighter shade of gray. Increase the hardness on your soft brush to about a 3 or a 4. And start making some brighter highlights in the direction of your light source. Apply your highlights where you see fit. And if you want, you can use your blending brush to blend out some of those edges. And finally, I'm going to take a darker shade of gray and use that gray to start drawing shadows away from the light source. Once you have all your shadows placed, you can then use your blur tool and use it to blur the harsher edges of the shadow, especially the ones that are closest to the light source. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to draw an orange, specifically the center of one, after it's been cut in half. I'll be using a few tips that I saw from Bubble Sheen, specifically in the video where she showed how to draw the inside of a balloon knot. So if you haven't seen that video yet, I advise you to check it out after this one. Once you have the general shape of your orange, you want to start by drawing a tight little oval for your center. And once you have your oval, we're going to draw a little cross in the center. And you're going to want to make sure you draw these cross lines at a slight curve. And then you're going to use your guidelines to draw the shape of your center. You're going to end up with lines that look like a starburst. And between each star, we're going to go in and draw a thicker line. We want to make sure we have a tight center, but not quite this tight. Once you have your shape, you can use your eraser to clean up your lines a little. Add a little shadow at the center, as well as some little detail lines around the perimeter. Once you've figured out your basic shape, you can then practice drawing it at different angles using the same basic rules. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. My birthday's in a few days, so I'm going to show you how to draw cake batter. Personally, I like a nice vanilla cake or a butter cake, so we're going to choose a nice creamy color for the cake batter. And depending on how hydrated the cake batter is, it's going to be pretty loose when hanging off of the whisk. It can also be pretty messy and lumpy, and if you're not careful, it's going to get everywhere. You're going to want to keep your lines nice and loose in order to show how it runs and clings to the whisk. You also want to make sure you're drawing a little bit of cake batter to each one of these spokes. Once you have the general shape of your cake batter, you can start adding some more fun details to show just how loose the cake batter is. And depending on how messy you want your cake batter to look, you can use these same loose lines to draw cake batter along the sides of your bowl. Cake batter isn't really reflective, but we are going to take a slightly darker color and make some shadows in the opposite direction of the light source. Cake batter is pretty thick, but we're going to draw just a little transparency here where it clings to the side of the bowl. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. It's been over 6 months since my original How to Make Things Look Wet video, and now it's time for an updated version. First, you want to pick the object that you want to make look wet. In this example, I'm using cherries. I use this shade of red for my base color, and I use this shade of red to make a gradient in the direction of my light source. I also use that same lighter shade of red to make some bounce light on the opposite side of the cherry. I then use this shade of red to add direct light in the direction of the light source. And finally, I use this shade of pink for highlights. And now we're going to decide how we want this moisture to sit on our cherry. I'm using this darker shade of red to indicate our moisture. And I'm going to use that color to draw some lines to show how the moisture hangs off the cherry. Fill in your color, and then we're going to take a soft eraser and use it to lightly erase the center of your wet area. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you can leave some areas more transparent than others. And then you want to turn down the opacity. I set mine to 65%. I'm taking the same shade of pink that I used for my highlights, and I'm going to use it to draw some highlights along the edges of our moisture. And if you want, you can draw some additional highlights that mimic the curve of your object. And finally, using that same highlight color, I do some drips to show how the moisture is running down the cherry. And here's a new and improved way to make your cherries look wet. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how to make things look squishy. First, we'll start by roughing in our shape, and for this example, I'm going to go for more of a teardrop. And then we're going to rough in the basic shape of our hand using a rectangle for the palm and some guidelines for the thumb and fingers. When drawing your fingers, make sure you bend them at the joints so that they look like they're sinking into your squishy object. Once you've roughed in your shape in your hand, we're going to draw some curved lines up to show how the object is being distorted by the fingers. And make sure to go in and delete the areas of the fingers where they'll no longer be seen. Once you've cleaned up your shape and finalized your line work, we'll make a new layer and add some color. Then take a slightly darker color and use it to draw some shadows. This will help give your object some depth and further indicate how it's being distorted by the hands. And finally, we'll take a lighter color to draw some highlights where light is hitting your object. Happy drawing! Hope this helps. I'm going to show you how you can draw spilt milk. First, you want to pick out a nice creamy color like this. And we're going to use a round brush to draw how the milk is leaking out of the cup. One thing I like to do when I'm drawing something leaking is in the main source of the leak into a point and then continue it like a drip. It's not necessary, but I think it adds something a little more interesting. Make sure you draw some leakage all the way down until we get to our puddle. When drawing your puddle, make sure it takes an oval shape that's centered with the source of the spill. And using that main oval as a guide, you're going to draw your milk in a way that shows that it splashes and spreads across the floor. Now that I have my milk drawn, I'm going to use a soft brush to draw some white along the perimeter of the splash. It's not a necessary step, but I think adding this little gradient helps it look a little more interesting. Next, we're going to use a soft round eraser and draw some transparency in the center of our milk. Make sure you do this all the way down the drip. And we're going to do the same thing with our main puddle on the floor. Once we're done with our erasing, we're going to use a round brush and use a white to draw the highlights along the milk. When drawing your highlights, make sure you're doing it in a way to emphasize the movement of the milk across the floor. And don't forget to also add highlights from the main source of the spill. And that's how you draw spilled milk. Happy drawing. Hope this helps. Come draw a cookie with me. And while we do that, I'm going to read Who Will Eat My Cookie by Kinsey Mazing. I have a delicious cookie. It's so tasty and sweet. But who will eat my cookie? Who will get my treat? Johnny, will you eat my cookie? I'm begging you, please. Sorry, Susie, but I can't. Would you quit asking me? Jeez. Susie continues walking, looking for someone new. And soon enough, she spots him. Look, it's Mr. Pugh. Mr. Pugh, do you like cookies? Mine's the best you'll have in your life. Thanks, Susie. It does look good, but I only eat my wife's. Poor Susie is so sad. What's wrong with her cookie? Surely someone wants to eat it. It's not like she's a rookie. Susie spots Sarah Johnson, the high school gym teacher. Surely she'll eat my cookie. She stops her by the bleachers. Sarah, look at my cookie. Isn't it so pretty? Do you want to eat it? I promise you'll feel giddy. Sorry, Susie, but no can do. Sweets aren't my thing. If you've got a roast beef sandwich, then you can give me a ring. Oh, look, it's Neil. He's the nicest guy. Surely he'll eat my cookie. It's definitely worth a try. Hi, Neil. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Do you want to eat my cookie? It really is just swell. Hi, Susie. Thanks for asking. Your cookie looks so sweet. I'm sorry to tell you this, though, but all I eat is meat. Then Susie sees Mr. Jim. She greets him and says hi. Mr. Jim, will you eat my cookie? You're such a nice guy. No thanks, Susie, and I'm sure your cookie's lit. But I'm not a fan of vanilla. I only eat chocolate. Susie starts to cry. She can't believe her luck. No one wants her cookie. It must really suck. Then along comes Andy Green, the city's engineer. He takes one look at Susie and dries up all her tears. What's the matter, Susie? Why are you so upset? I'm here for you now. There's no reason to fret. No one will eat my cookie, Andy, and I don't understand why. It's so sweet and tasty. I wish someone would give it a try. Susie, I'll eat your cookie. Why didn't you just say so? I love eating cookies. I would never tell you no.